I was born here, and I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. Well, I'm a musician. I went on the road in the 60s, probably 65 or something. I was still going to school. But I ended up in 1970, I moved to Nashville, and I was a songwriter. Most of my life, I lived back here for 8 years during that time and had 3 kids. Wanted them to be born in Norfolk, because I think that's a good thing. And so then I moved back to Nashville and lived there writing songs for a living and playing sessions and recording and things, all those things, toured till 2004. And I moved back to Nebraska, and I was just ready to be around my friends all the time again. But the reason I'm here today is, I know this is something that's 100%. I get a 100% answer. How many people have, first, how many people, this will be 0, have never been to Central Park? All right, I knew. Thank you, I'll remember that. I'll use you later. You know, Central Park, that's something you guys probably go over every day, especially when it's warm, and you've been there when you were little, been to the old wading pool. You've been there and you've driven by there hundreds and thousands of times probably. And I guess when it comes, you go, well, what is that park all about? Well, I got real interested in the park. I've always been interested in it because that's where I went. I lived over on 2nd Street, and we came over there every day and played, and the girls learned how to twirl batons, and I learned how to shoot a bow and arrow, and I would never go in the wading pool. Too many kids doing you know what in the wading pool. That wasn't my deal. But besides that, it was, you know, just a big part of where we'd grown up with. And of course, that bandstand over there, you probably wondered, maybe going, what is that thing over there? What's the purpose of that whole thing? Well, I just want to tell you a few things about it, and hopefully you guys will be interested, because some of you guys may move out of Norfolk and leave, you know, for good. And and when you leave, you'll you know, you may come back to visit once in a while, but some of you guys are going to live here. It's going to be up to you to keep this town going. It doesn't just go on its own. If you want it to be a fun place, then you're the ones that are going to have to do it. I'm getting too old, and that's the story. It wasn't just this long ago. I was your age, and it seemed like that long ago, and I was sitting there having fun, and I thought anybody over 16 was full of crap and whatever. But I learned that's not it. It all came back to me, and it was all in us. So I just want to tell you guys a few things about the park. Last year, I read an article, or 2 years ago, in the paper where they said they were going to tear down, in the little teeny, you'll learn about politicians and what they do. They put all the stuff they don't want you to know about. Law makes them print it, but they put it in little bitty teeny words that go right by you, so you go, oh, I never knew that was going to happen. And but I read where they were going to bulldoze the bandstand down. You know what the bandstand is over there. And so I decided, well, I got to find something about this. I can't complain unless I know something. So I went up to the museum. You all know where the museum is? I don't know if you've ever been there or spent any time, but really a cool place. All kinds of cool old stuff in there that you'll never ever see again in your lifetime, or anybody's lifetime, because that's never going to happen again. And the gal up there, it was, I got Ruthie, got to remember what Ruthie Galitz. She's the really nice woman. Helped me find out this stuff, but let's see. The first thing that I could find out about the park over here was went all the way back to 1886. Who's my math whiz here can do that? 2013, 1886.
These are all my gifted
Do it the
kids.
easy way. You're gifted.
126.
How much?
126.
You're right on the money. Got to use a shortcut to get there. You know that hundred's in there, then you take whatever's under 100 and add it to what's ever 100, and you got the whole total. 126 years ago. That's a lot of generations of people. They started using this park over here And back then, Paswalk Avenue was nothing but a trail where the people had, and there were a lot of farmers over there. Most of them in this area were Lutherans. But it was just a trail here. People needed a place to get together and gathered, so this was all, none of this was here. There were fields all over, and once in a while there would be a farm in that big block over there, right in the middle of over here. And so people started gathering in the different churches. When the Lutherans had a church get together, they'd get together over there. And if there were whatever the churches were, that's where they went. But there were mostly Lutherans in this area then, and probably still a lot of Indians here too. I don't know if they gathered there or not. Be proud of that. Be proud of that. They, you know, that's where everybody gathered over here at this big block over here. And some of these dates won't stick with you, but in before I could even find the Norfolk Daily News, the newspaper, there was a newspaper called the Norfolk Press. And in 1916, somebody wrote in the paper, we need a place for this town to gather. And they decided that, that this would be a good place. And at that time, it was called Homestead Grove. It was just a big grove of trees with some space. And they called it the People's Park over here. And, you know, a park then was different. You had to, there were no slippery slides and all this stuff. And nobody was, oh, this will be fun. You had to make up your own games. You're going, oh man, I don't know about kicking a can as a game or whatever they played. I'm sure they did something to keep them from being bored then. And so 1916, that's a long time ago. And so they wanted this to be a park where people could get together. And because everybody in town was coming here. So in 1917, there was an article in the paper. And 1917, let's see, that's 90, how many years ago? 95. Is that right? Okay, I'll take your word for it. 95 years ago. The city voted in 1917, they voted they were going to put up, voted $10,000. That doesn't sound like $10,000 now. That won't get you a used car, but back in the day, huge amount of money. Huge amount of money. And they got together with the Paswalk family. And there are still Paswalks live in Norfolk, I think. I went to school with, they were all related to him. And they offered him $9,000 for all this land around here, which is a lot of land, but it was the central area in Norfolk. And they established a park there, and they decided to call it Central Park. 1917, there you go. And about that same time, I didn't know this till a couple days ago, that the firemen, y'all know where the fire station is. Back in the day, and I didn't know this, that firemen had a lot of time on their hands. And because they were sitting waiting for a fire to happen, work on their equipment. And it became, this was all over the United States, I didn't know this, all the firehouses had a band. If you worked for the fire department, you might play the tuba. And the guys would, with that time they had, would sit in the fire station and practice. And every little town that had a fire station had a band. And I went over and talked to our fire chief the other day, and he told me they're looking for pictures, and I'm going to try to get some copies for you guys to look at. Because I want you to stay interested in this, because this is your town. But they had a band. He found a picture from 1910 of the band here. In 1910, I mean, that's 103 years ago, and they had their band, and bands from all over the state. He's got another picture that they're all gathered somewhere at a big contest. That was the town. Instead of having, we got the best football team or whatever, they probably didn't have sports of any much kind competitive then. So it was who had the best fire department band. And they'd go out like a battle of the bands, only they're not playing the guitars. And they'd get together, thousands of people get together in all these little groups in Nebraska and have a big contest to see who would do it. And so the reason I'm telling you that is because the firemen decided that they were going to take the lead on it, and they urged the city, and they may have put in money to help with it, but they built this bandstand over here. And now it's kind of hard to tell what that bandstand looks like. It looks like a big square thing. But there have always been things going on that. And back in the day, you know how Norfolk Avenue, when they redid it a few years ago, they put the big light lamps up, you know? Well, that's what had over here. There was one on each corner of that bandstand. And when I was a kid, if I was walking from Norfolk Avenue or Cub Scouts or somewhere up by Sacred Heart at night and it was dark, I could look all the way down 5th Street and see those lights. I knew that was my town, that was my bandstand, and the lights would stay on until 10 o'clock, and you could see them all over. And that's where the kids played. Everybody, you know, everybody hung over there all the time. And in 1935, a group of people decided they wanted a city auditorium, and they wanted it to be built across the street on the Central Park. They wanted to do away with the park and build an auditorium, but people were really strong about that. And there was a big fight in town, and they decided they're not going to do that, and they built the city auditorium, the old one, you know, where it's sitting right now over on 1st Street. And where I first came into it, besides hanging there like everybody did, in 1983, I was still living in Norfolk, and my kids were real little. I found back then that they were going to bulldoze it down. They didn't tell anybody. They just went over there and they got somebody with a cutting torch. And I don't know if there's big railings over there, those big iron railings, and they cut them all off, and they had hauled them away. They were getting ready to take them to the dump. And we found out about that, and a friend of mine, Bill Sattel, who runs Sattel's Copycraft uptown, and he's a musician, we decided we weren't going to stand for that. They're just not going to do that. That's our town, and this is your town. And so we started raising Cain, as you want to say, and we got articles in the paper, and, you know, got the city councilman organized, and everybody in Norfolk was in an uproar. That's the way I like it. It was, because, you know, it had been called the People's Park, and people raised so much noise about it, the city council voted overwhelmingly to keep it there. So they went ahead and, in 1983, we decided we were going to let them tear it down. So we did that, and they actually went and got out of the dump, got the railings back that are there now. If you'll look at them when you're over there, you can see where they welded them back on. Huh. And we had a great big concert, and there were between 2,000 and 3,000 people at Central Park, free. All the musicians showed up. We did that 3 years in a row to keep that going, and then the city decided, who managed it at that time, that they didn't want us to do that unless we would carry $1 million insurance policy, and we didn't have the money for doing it, and so we actually quit doing the free stuff. Now, people running the city are encouraging that to entertain over there. So if you guys are entertainers or got something going, that's yours to use. Anyway, that's how far back that this goes over there.